Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1370. The topic is mindset, and the title is, What Can You Do When There's Nothing You Can Do? Odd question, but that's often how we feel. And it can happen in moments, it can happen in seasons of life. So if we say, for example, we go to a party and we want to eat healthy and we look around and it's only desserts. And we're like, oh man, I really want to try these desserts, but I know I shouldn't. I'm supposed to eat healthy, but I don't really see any kind of like clean food around. What do I do? Do I just not eat anything? But then I know that's not good. But if I eat any of this, I'm either, maybe I'm going to eat too much. So I have questions, like clients ask me questions where, like what can I do if I can't weigh or measure the food that I'm eating? So often if they're using like a MyFitnessPal or nutrition tracker of some kind, we will kind of like want to measure our foods. You're either weighing them or you're figuring out like portion sizes so that way you can enter it into your food tracker. And we do have a podcast for that. It's podcast 1143. It's a nutrition podcast titled How to Track Foods When You Can't Measure Them. So that does give us the answer. But in those moments, we kind of feel flustered. We're unsure. We're not, we don't know what to do. What happens whenever we are supposed to train on a certain day, but all of a sudden there's a doctor's appointment or some kind of life event or somebody needs you, just too many other things get in the way. And all of a sudden we feel like we aren't going to have time to work out. Now, there could also be seasons of life. If you have a family member who's going through a rough health moment, there might be a couple weeks or months, that you kind of are just out of your normal routine trying to help them with different issues. There's a lot of circumstances. If you're in one right now, you're going to recognize it. There's a lot of circumstances in which we have a plan. We kind of know what we would like to do or what we want to do or what we quote unquote should do. Now, that's always kind of I don't even know what to say there, but it's kind of a little bit of like a red flag word where, we have priorities in life and sometimes they need to shift or move. So, for example, if something were to happen to one of my parents health-wise and they're in the hospital, well, like I might say like, okay, well, I should eat healthy. I should work out today, but maybe that's not going to be the highest priority. Maybe I need to go take care of my family member in the hospital. And it means I don't get to work out today or I don't work out for the next 2 or 3 days. Like there's things in life, there's moments in life that priorities shift. And we are doing what is the right thing for our priority list and kind of what we consider to be most important for us. But that does then mean sometimes that something that's still high on the list, just not number one, gets kind of bumped to the side. So there are a lot of challenges in life when we navigate these moments, these feelings of there's nothing I can do right now. I feel stuck. I feel paralyzed. I feel like I'm just going to lose all my gains. We go through all these kind of mental aspects, and it can be very challenging to navigate those moments. We tend to feel very defeated, kind of like lose motivation. We start to say like, oh, this always happens to me, that kind of mindset. And it causes, it kind of takes away from our focus on what we can still do. It takes away our focus on still being proactive, and we tend to just kind of shut down. So this circumstance, for example, is if I'm planning to go to the gym today and get a full 1 hour workout in, but life gets in the way, I find myself 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I'm not going to get to work out. And we would say, I lost the whole day. And then we sit and watch TV for 2.5, 3 hours. And it's like, what the hell? There was still time. You could have still done some bodyweight exercises. You still could have done something, right? So, for example, we find ourselves at the party and there's all this crazy food. And we say, oh man, I can't eat what I'm supposed to eat. I'll just eat an entire pie and then some of this dessert and then some of that dessert. And 5,000 calories later, I feel super guilty. So often we don't really plan ahead mentally for when what we want to do can't be done. And that's what I wanted to kind of talk about in today's podcast. So when it comes to like nutrition, when you find yourself in the kind of position, what can I do when there's nothing I can do, is for nutrition, it's to know what matters most. Often people focus on what they're eating when it's actually how much you eat that matters more. Now, we've talked about this in a lot of podcasts. If you're new to us, a podcast you can check out is podcast 1232. It's a nutrition podcast titled Start Here, and it'll tell you kind of like what's most important and what order you should be placing your focus on. If you're not new to us, then you already know the answer. It's calories and protein. We talk about this all the time. If I'm supposed to have 400 calories at this meal, if I have 400 calories of pizza, maybe not the best choice if there was better foods available, but 400 calories of pizza is better than 0 calories. And then all of a sudden I'm going for this crazy long stretch of time without food, and then my body gets very frustrated because I didn't provide it the energy that it needed, and then therefore when I eat later on, it's going to store more of those calories as fat. We talk about that in podcast 1344, nutrition podcast titled Balancing the Books. So we've talked about these things a little bit in the sense that we know the most impactful, the most important thing for us to focus on is calories. And then of our calories, are we paying attention to the fact that any of them are protein? So it would be good to have some protein in there. How much protein? That depends on the person. Now, we do have a podcast for that, and that's in podcast 1232. So just listen to that one. It'll kind of answer all your nutrition questions. But that is what we should focus on. In the moment, I would say, okay, if I don't have the right foods, quote unquote, the foods I would normally select available to me, just what do I have? Do I have anything available to me? And can I match the amount of calories that I would normally eat at a meal? So if you would normally eat 300 calories, eat 300 calories of whatever the hell you have. If you have 600 calories, eat 600 calories of whatever the hell you have. Whatever's around you. If you have time, you can Google that food real quick and, say like whatever it is. Say chips. Just type in, in a Google search, chips nutrition facts. And you'll see like what the serving size is for the amount of calories you're supposed to have. So if it's pizza, maybe not half the pizza, just have one slice. So you can Google real quick to see what the nutrition facts of that food are, and that will tell you the portion size per X amount of calories. Then you adjust the portion to match the calories that you need. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just to take a big fat guess. But that's going to have a lot more variance to it. You're going to have a lot of doubt whether you did anything right or wrong. But the big picture is you ate something. You ate something rather than skipping the meal, and that is a better choice. So, knowing what matters most will help you. Because you want to maintain the minimum, essentially, is when what you want to do isn't there to do. You can't do what you want to do. What can you do at least? You can at least maintain the minimum. At least track your calories. That's something you can do. Or at least be mindful of your calories. How about training? Again, know what matters most. Maintaining the minimum is just, most people, for most things, I'm going to give you a little more detail here in a second, is just to move. If you couldn't get in the workout that you were supposed to get in today, just move in any way. Just move. That's at least movement. Now, if you've had a crazy day and you're like, I don't feel like moving, that's reasonable. We have podcast 1117. It's a mindset podcast titled How to Get Motivated to Work Out. Listen to that now. Listen to that before you get to the place of not feeling motivated. So that way you'll have that kind of what that podcast teaches in the back of your mind. You'll have that information ready to use. And then you can help motivate yourself when you don't feel motivated. But for fat loss, if your goal is fat loss, movement. It doesn't, like, go for a walk, march up and down the steps. Doesn't matter what the hell it is. Just move. If you can't do what you would normally have done, still do something. Maintain the minimum. Just add some movement. If your goal is muscle building, you're trying to build muscle tissue, well, then you do want to create some muscle damage, muscle annoyance. So going for a walk might not be the best investment of that time. You might be better off doing something that's like physical exercise, like moving your body around, like push-ups, sit-ups, bodyweight squats. I'm about to tell you a really goofy story, but this is actually true. Is I went with Meredith one time, and for one circumstance or another, and we'll leave that part out, I was waiting. I was with her, and I was happy to be with her. That wasn't what I meant by the circumstances; just had other details. But we were at a place, and she was getting some eyelashes put on, and this was actually kind of before our wedding. So she was getting these eyelash extension things put on, and it was at this woman's house. We didn't know this kind of location very well, so I went with her, so that way she wouldn't be alone in this weird place. But the woman didn't feel comfortable with me being in her house because it was. She didn't like that there would be a guy in her house, and she asked if I would stay outside. Totally understandable, 100%. Downside was it was like 20 degrees outside, and I was like, damn, I'm going to freeze my butt off out here. But where we ended up having to park, it would be in a location in which I wouldn't really have been able to see the apartment door, and I wouldn't have felt like I was nearby to help Meredith in case there was an issue. So I couldn't be in the apartment. I couldn't go down to the car to stay warm. So I was basically just standing outside of this apartment for like an hour, freezing my butt off. But I was like, okay, I got to do some movement. But if I just pace back and forth, what's that going to do? So I was like, well, maybe I can just do some calf raises. So I actually stood there and did these like weird bodyweight calf raises. I think I ended up doing like 1,000 calf raises, and I couldn't walk like the next 2 days. It was amazing. It was awesome. My calves were so freaking sore that I was having so much trouble walking for the next 2 days because I stood there and did like 1,000 bodyweight calf raises in a very slow, controlled motion. Didn't release tension, like made it like really fun. And I was trying to play like, okay, if I pushed in my pinky toe, then through my next toe, the next toe, the next toe, then my big toe, and I was trying to alternate between the reps, which toes I was pushing in. This is what I do in my brain all day, which is scary. But that was an example, very weird example, of in that moment, I kind of like, what I love to have done would have a workout that day, but that was a crazy day. We were driving around doing a lot of things to get prepared for the wedding. But that was at least something I could do, but it was better than walking. I didn't really need walking for what my goals are at the moment. I was like, well, this might be a fun chance to kind of do some calf training. I kind of miss calves every now and then. So I was like, I'll do that. So that was a great example of something that I could still do given the situation I was in. And it was kind of more specific to my goals than just general movement such as walking. If your goal is strength, something you can play around with is plyometrics. If you do like bodyweight jumping type things, that's actually pretty awesome for strengthening your connective tissues in your joints. So that's a cool option you can do that doesn't require any equipment. And you can also do stretching. Oh, I know. It just, feels like I just said a cuss word. But if you're a strength athlete, you do need to stretch. Now, you don't need to be able to wrap yourself in a pretzel. That's not necessarily safe and stable for your joints. But you probably have some tight muscles that you can, take some time to stretch. Not necessarily try to hyperextend it to some end range of crazy joint manipulation, but at least be able to get through a normal full range of motion. So if you look up like a hip airplane, that's an example of an exercise you would see that's something that you can do to kind of encourage and open up range of motion through your hip joints, but it's not going to make you like hypermobile where all of a sudden you're destabilizing your core and your lower back. So it's not going to do anything crazy like that. So these are ideas in which we can still move. Maybe I don't have the time I expected to have. I don't have the equipment availability I expected to have, but I have myself. I have my own, fat body. I can move around, and that feels, exhausting enough. But that's something that we can still do. So when it feels like there's nothing we can do, there's actually this stuff. This is the stuff that we can do. How about mindset-wise? The concepts we said with nutrition was know what matters most. At least maintain the minimum, which is calories. For training, we know to maintain the minimum, which fat loss is movement. Muscle building is just to annoy the crap out of your muscles in some way whatsoever. Strength might be the plyometrics or the stretching. For mindset, you still want to have that mindset of keep moving. Do something. If you sit there and do nothing, that's going to get you nothing. Do something. Learn. Look up a video on YouTube or try to find, Elite FTS has 40 billion articles if you like to read. They have 40 billion articles on their website. Tons of resources there. We have 1,370 podcasts you can listen to, so that's something. But there's tons of free education just out there in the world now, and that's something you can always do, is learn. So if you're driving, maybe you can't read, so you listen to a podcast. If you're sitting there bored in the waiting room, maybe you want to have something to read because it keeps you kind of more physically engaged than just simply listening to something. So that might be a good option. But just learn something. That's a good thing. You can also just take whatever time you're in, if you have availability, to just have some me time. Turn off all sounds. Actually put your phone down. Just have some time and quietness to just breathe. Think about nothing. Now, you do end up thinking about something, but, just try to take 5, 10, 15 minutes. Just close your eyes, sit quietly, and just see if you can kind of restore yourself a little bit mentally and emotionally. That can be very beneficial. So if you're driving in a car, turn off the radio. And just give yourself some mental space, some stimulus space, to just be present in the moment for yourself. That could be a great investment, because how rarely do we actually do that? Very rarely. We also, something I remember, or kind of try to remember, is when I have moments where when I wanted to work out or I wanted to eat, certain foods, and all of a sudden I can't, I remind myself to remember the moment. I want to remember what it felt like when I couldn't work out. Now, why in the world would I do that? Because it's motivation for when I can work out, but I just kind of don't feel like I want to. I'm like, okay, I remember whenever I wanted to work out, I was super ticked off, annoyed, frustrated, and I was like, dang it, so freaking mad I can't work out. Right now, I have the opportunity to work out. But I'm being a big fat baby, and I'm saying I don't want to do it even though I can. So quit being a baby. Remember how it felt when you were frustrated and angry. So go freaking work out since you have the opportunity. This is the G-rated version. But this is something that I do. I don't know if this is necessarily healthy, but it's helped me, is to just remind myself what it feels like in moments when I'm frustrated. When I'm frustrated about when power or control or opportunity is taken away from me, I want to remember those moments, so then when I have the power, control, opportunity to actually do it, I remind myself to freaking do it, because I know how, that was super important to you on that freaking day. It's just as important to you today, so go freaking do it. Get moving. So that's something I do for myself. And then also remember that progress is more important than perfection. I don't care if I can do everything perfect, but I'm at least going to do something, right? So podcast 1173 is a mindset podcast titled Progress Over Perfection. And it's to remind us that it's not important that I got to do the perfect thing. It's important that I did a thing. So on a day when it feels like the perfect thing can't be done, anything is better than no thing. Progress is more important than perfection. So if we ask ourselves, what can you do when there's nothing you can do? When you find yourself in a situation in which you feel like there's nothing you can do, the question really is, what can I do when I can't do what I wanted to do? So when I wanted to do, I can't do, what do I do? Anything. Maintain the minimums. Just try to give attention in some way. Nutrition, at least know your calories. Training, at least move. Mindset wise, try to learn, try to relax, try to remember. Something that can help is to plan for the unplanned. Expect the unexpected. Plan for when perfection isn't possible. Podcast 916 is a mindset podcast titled Flexible Habits. Fan-freaking-tastic podcast. Stole a bunch of information from a bunch of books, but flexible habits is going to be extremely important. So that way when it comes to your training, I have best case scenario, good enough scenario, worst case scenario. But I plan ahead for what I can do in each of those moments. Same thing with training. Same thing with any of my goals, finances, relationships, anything. But to understand and plan ahead, what is my best option? What is my good enough option? What's the thing I could do when it's the worst day ever? But plan ahead. That helps a lot. So again, what can you do when there's nothing you can do? Change that question. Change that mindset. What can I do when I can't do what I wanted to do? Anything. Something. Just keep moving in some way towards your goals. Okay? Well, I wish you the best luck. If you have any questions, email me at brutalirongym@gmail.com. I'm always here, always available. If you like today's podcast or podcast in general, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people we can help. Sharing it on social media does reach the most amount of people. But even if you're just sharing a conversation, that's a big thing as well. We just want that if this podcast has helped your life, that we give it the opportunity to help as many other people's lives as well. Thank you to the patrons of the podcast, people who financially support the podcast. The podcast is well over $1,000 a year for hosting costs. I give an hour to it every single day. I would love to keep it for free and without a bunch of ads all, jam-packed in it and whatnot. I would love to maintain this as much as I can. And the financial support from our patrons is the only way that makes any sense. So you can give financially on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. We have an option there for one-time donation, monthly donation, yearly donation. Anything you can give is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Also, if you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. If you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, anything you want to know, let us know at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.